Welcome to Will Still Doesn't Know How to Come Up with Intros for these types of videos. Today we're talking about Days Before Dreamboy by Lil Nas X. And this wasn't really, when I started this channel, like an album or a project, I think I should say, that I was really considering talking about, or even had in my mind of talking about anytime soon, or ever really, considering that in some regards it's old and the time of it is gone, and it came out in March of 2025, so it's like, the relevancy of the project is gone. Not saying that's why I want to make these videos, that really matters, but like it didn't seem like a project that really had much interesting to talk about. But I would argue actually that is kind of why it's interesting to talk about, at least to me. That's what, on a revisit and just thinking about it a lot, the fact that I even had this project in my brain after listening to it, considering what it is, I think is interesting in itself for me, and so that's why I wanted to talk about it a little bit. Also, of course, as of I think a couple months ago by this point, Lil Nas X was in the news again for having an episode being, seen in the streets of LA, I believe, not doing too well, which is obviously horrible. So I think we should obviously start this by saying, I hope he's well. I hope whatever's going on with him gets figured out and that he feels better soon, because that's horrible for someone to go through and for it to be filmed and put publicly, and that's pretty bad. And it's unfortunate that I have to say that I'm not surprised that happened to him, because ever since Lil Nas X became big, with Old Town Road, and then came out as gay, and even prior to that, people trying to cancel him and stuff, he's always been a controversial figure for reasons that are just a bit silly. I think him being himself in the genre he's in, and just in the current way that the internet is, and his content and his artistry being very internet focused, unfortunately led him to be subject to a lot of criticism, just because people are horrible, basically. And being an artist who relied so heavily on the internet for marketing, and being himself and being the one who was making the tweets, and who put a lot of ideas into each video and all this kind of stuff, he was the one who had to face the brunt of all this, and he had to experience it himself. And although he kind of had this attitude of I don't care, whatever, brushing it off to the side a lot of the time, he's human. It's gonna break through. It's gonna actually hurt, as much as you can kind of put up this facade of I don't care, which is the best thing to do to people like this. I'm sure it did affect him, and I think now he's in the space of his career he's in, which is what we're going to discuss in a minute, it probably felt worse. So what am I talking about? I'm not going to give you the whole history of Lil Nas X, because I think we don't need it. I think a lot of people understand who he is. He got famous making the viral hit that was Old Town Road, and all the controversy of that not getting in the charts the right way, and then all this kind of stuff. Then he got all the remixes. He's worked with so many artists who are very well established and big in loads of different genres, as well as some more internet niche people, the Walmart Kid. He always gave off this unapologetic I am me vibe to his music, and just doing what he enjoyed. And once he came out as gay, I feel like he very much dived into that, of just being fuck it, I'm gonna be me, and I'm gonna take whatever criticism I get for it, because it's bullshit anyway, and we're just gonna do what I want. And it worked for a while. Montero, his first full-length album, I think is great. I think it's a really good project. Seeing the amount of features he got on that project is amazing, and very impressive for an artist of their first album coming out, when it did, and how long he'd been around. He really seemed to be evolving well from making, music for the hell of it, and just riding the meme, to making actual stuff he seemed to really care about and put himself all into. And it was nice to see, in songs like Holiday, where he's got the line pop star but the rappers still respect me, as well as Rode the Gimmick, I'll admit it. And he just seemed, aware of how he got to where he was, and he wasn't ashamed of it, as he shouldn't be, and it led to some great music out of it, and that was great. The general feedback and stuff I seemed to see of Montero is that people loved it. He had huge hits from it. A lot of those songs unfortunately are now connected to brain rot, like Industry Baby, but regardless, it's not the song's fault. It's, he's good music, man. But that album came out in 2021, and since then, his release of music has been strange, and showing signs of what I think this entire project shows signs of. He made Late to the Party, which was the Fuck BET song. He made the League of Legends soundtrack song, He made a song for his documentary, Beverly Hills Cop Axel F, which I actually fucking love that song, by the way. And the first single of what appeared to be the rollout for his, second album was J Christ, which again got some criticism just because, I don't know, God forbid he uses like religious imagery and be gay. Ooh. Oh no. But I actually really like this song. I heard that some people didn't like it. I really vibed with it. I thought it was a very good song, and I was really looking forward to where the project was going to go. And then it wasn't until months later that we got the next single. I know I've been yapping a lot. I'm just going to get straight to the point. This project, Days Before Dreamboy, shows very clear signs to me of an artist who is very much dealing with the fear of a sophomore album. And we can theorize as to why that is. Maybe it's because of the general discussions that you may be seeing online. Maybe it's because of the pressures from his label. Maybe it's just how he feels in his own personal way in terms of what he can do and what he needs to do to prove to himself he should still be around where he is, considering how he came up in the industry. I'm sure it can be easy to feel a bit of imposter syndrome, and that, if you came up on a gimmick, you might feel like you don't deserve to be where you are and that you're just a meme and, your 15 minutes is running out soon. I don't believe that is the case with Lil Nas. I think he's proved to himself, hopefully, and to the wider industry that he deserves to be where he is, and that he is a unique enough artist, and that he has his own identity, that he deserves to be an artist and to be seen, and he's not just ripping off other people. He's not just like making music for the hell of it. He very clearly has an idea of his musical identity, what music he likes, the vibe he wants to give off, and his own messages and stuff, which is nice to see. And it isn't just, a bad baby or someone who just seems to be making music because it works, or like, fucking Jake and Logan Paul and make music when they can to get money. He's clearly an artist through and through, and that's great. This project very clearly isn't what he envisioned as a second album. And I think the biggest sign of that is that this isn't his second album. This is marked as an 8-song EP, and I believe it's actually a mixtape. It gives mixtape vibes. And what I mean by that is like the commercial definition of a mixtape. I like artists like Logic and Travis Scott, who I believe the Days Before name was, taken from, the Days Before Rodeo mixtape, which my understanding was a project to be released prior to the full release of the main event, as a way of putting it, of Rodeo. This isn't old school mixtape, samples that weren't legally agreed on, just to prove who he was. This seems like it was meant to be a little, in terms of its release, a quick starter before the main project. However, I don't know if that was the entire intention the entire time this was being made. There's a few reasons I say that. One thing being that this came out on the 28th of March 2025. I don't know when this is coming out, but it's now 2026 probably when this is coming out. So it's been a few days by this point. The rollout was also very peculiar, to the extent where like every single was being released at one point one a week, then it was one a day, then it went back to one a week. What we ended up with in the end was, like I said, this 8-song, 25-minute mixtape EP, which musically wise, I quite enjoy listening to. I think HOTBOX is great. I think it's my favorite by far on the project. I keep wanting to say album. It's fun. It's well produced. It's a song which feels very him and doesn't feel like it's just chasing trends. It feels very unique to him. And the rest of the songs I enjoy also quite a decent bit. With that said, this isn't a very cohesive project, and it does feel a bit underwhelming. And I think part of that is just because of the way it was given to us. Like I said, this really weird quick release schedule of just like spitting the songs out fast, and then all of a sudden, here you go, here's all of them, but this isn't the main project. Like, you go into it knowing this isn't a full project. There's even a line that references J Christ, the single from earlier in the year, which, by the way, does not appear on this project. So I don't know if that's being left until the full album, or if that's just not being put onto a full album. It's also probably worth mentioning that the full album isn't gonna end up released the way that it was probably ever envisioned, partly because of this project we'll ever go into, but also because not long prior to the episode that Lil Nas X had in public, he started just to release loads of songs unofficially onto his Instagram, which I believe are still there to this day, with like quite big name features and stuff. So what it paints to me, and this is all theorizing really, which is part of the problem as well, because there's not a lot to be known about this project and the Dreamboy album as a whole online. Like, there's not, You go onto Wikipedia, it's very like surface level. It still says the project is releasing in 2025, which, you know, we're running out of time for that. It mentions songs appearing on it which appear on this EP, as well as some songs that we haven't seen, at least we haven't officially seen released. It mentions like some video teasers like running up to the project, which feels like a lot of effort. And like a lot of the themes of this album, like aesthetic wise and all this, does feel like there's a lot of effort put into it. And so to see this released seemingly with not much fanfare from his fan base or even him himself is a shame. It's not clear if these were songs that he or the label decided were not good enough for the full project. My guess is that he's maybe not with his label anymore. And my reason for thinking that is because, like I mentioned in the Doja Cat V discussion video, with how labels are nowadays, with Halsey, you know, expecting a lot of success after like a successful album, which is just sometimes not really possible to get, or not like very likely to get, and unreasonable to expect. With how big of a success Montero was, there was a lot of pressure probably on Lil Nas X to follow that up with something just as big, which I don't think was ever going to happen. Not because he fell off or anything like that, it's just that was such a cultural moment for music, I think, whether you liked it or not. Like, this artist who came up from online culture only and then got to a point where his full-length album had so many features on, was so grand compared to like how he started off with this Red Dead Redemption 2 song, was like a big story and like a big thing. And where do you go from there, I guess, in, you know, that chapter? It's going to be hard to follow that up. Talk about the music a bit more, because I haven't really gone into it a lot. This theme does seem to kind of appear in the music a lot. It comes across a bit like he's really trying to prove to whoever's listening, or himself, or just prove to someone that like he can still do this and don't give up on me yet. And it comes across from a lot of the bragging that happens on the project, talking about chart positions, talking about money, which, you know, isn't uncommon for music in these kind of genres and this kind of vibe. But given the context around it, it does shine through a bit more, which, so that's maybe my interpretation, which is completely wrong. I'm completely welcoming of that being the case. There's a lot of like mentions of like, I was gone, but now I'm back. You thought this was over and you counted me out, but you know, I can still do this. Almost like this album is proving that, and like those chart positions are what this album is getting, what he is still getting, when in reality we know that that part of success hasn't been had for a few years. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, you know, he's still a successful artist, and I feel like if this album was given a proper rollout and proper promotion, it would have done well. It wouldn't have done as well, but it would have done decently well. But in terms of what we have, it just feels like a mixtape. It just feels a bit cobbled together of the songs they had. There's a lot of repeated themes of that thing of like, you counted me out, but I'm still here. Even something as silly as Need That Boy being the only uncapitalized song in the tracklist. There's something that feels off about this entire mixtape. That said, I enjoy listening to it. I enjoyed the listen. I don't think these songs are trash and should be thrown out. I think they are decent releases, but that's about all they are. They're decent. Like I said, HOTBOX I think is great, and the rest are just pretty good. And, you know, if this is the project he wanted to make, if he wanted to make a more low-key project to kind of calm down, you know, after the huge thing that was Montero, you know, kind of not the same vibe, but a little bit of like Don't Tap That Glass vibe of like, okay, we had the big, cohesive, huge project, now it's like just have some music to vibe to, then fair. But this never felt like this was the intention. And throughout, there's just sprinkles of like, this isn't what you wanted it to be. Like I said, the Days Before title, the constant thing of like, you're listening to Dreamboy, even though we're not. The Barbie theme of you know, the album covers, and just the general like aesthetic seems like there's a lot of effort put into it, even though it's like minimalist with the colors and the white background. There seems to be a lot of effort put into what we are getting on the surface, but it feels like that effort was meant to be left for a bigger end product. And so I'm really hoping in 2026 or just, you know, whenever Lil Nas X feels better and is better, he can release whatever he wanted to release, and he can at least bring the project he had to fruition that he wanted, just for his own sake. Also out of interest to see like what he wanted to move on to. And going forward from there, you know, who knows? Like, I don't think he's ever going to be the massive, you know, like cultural zeitgeist filling artist. I'm just saying words at this point. I don't think he's ever going to be at the point he was before. but that's never a problem. I have a real fascination with artists and the fall off, which by the way isn't how I'm defining this project. It's just a theme that comes up a lot in a lot of the lyrics, which I've probably shown on screen by this point. If you're listening purely as a podcast, my bad. Go back. But I do find the fascination in artists who are near the end of their careers or still creating content past their mainstream prime and stuff like that. Just see what they create, why they create, how they react to the mental impact that must happen if you're going from being like one of the biggest things on the planet and getting like, you know, or just generally like if you're always working on the up and then you hit a peak and then you're still working just as hard, but because you've already been so high, there's nowhere else to go but down. I do find it really interesting to see how people react to that musically. I always hope they do okay, because that feels like probably a very weird, unique feeling for someone to go through. And so, you know, hopefully they were right. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not, and that's kind of a bummer. But yeah, so this does feel like slightly that. And so that's probably why I had so much to say about it. It's a slight fascination. Do I feel like this has to be the end of his career? No. Do I feel like it is? Hopefully not. There's of course a part of this mixtape where he says, I'm going to be giving you hits till 2025 or something. And then obviously like, after this EP came out, no more hits were to come. But yeah, I've been yapping for too long about this. I've probably said all I can. It's probably a bit jumbled, but so's the EP, I guess. Overall, despite everything I've said, I like the songs on this. That's just, it's probably going to take a while to like come out and just be like, yeah, I don't like this project. I have a fascination in it, and I think the songs are fun. It's just a shame that they clearly aren't maybe what they could have been, and that the impact of the project is definitely not what Lil Nas or definitely the label didn't want. But my final thoughts are, I really enjoy the "in the club trying to pick me out or pick me" line. I think that's class. Bye-bye.